Had Fire Emblem never introduced supports, the series probably wouldn't be here today. I feel like that's pretty fair to say. But that definitely doesn't mean every support conversation is a home run. While the majority are certainly good, sometimes even great, and sometimes just okay, there are a few outliers that are just baffling. Baffling for different reasons though. In fact, I think you can separate the worst supports in Fire Emblem history into 3 categories. You have the supports that are unbearingly boring, you have supports that are incredibly problematic, and you have supports that are so out of character it makes you question how they are even from the same game as some perfectly fine ones. And let's start a little journey with that first category, because it is also the first from a chronological standpoint. I probably don't have to tell you that the Binding Blade introduced support conversations, although actually seeing them in-game requires so much work it might as well not have. And worst of all, actually putting in the work to build support the intended way means wasting a whole lot of turns just to get conversations that are unbelievably dull. Sure, not literally every conversation in the Binding Blade sucks, but it's evident that while IS knew this was a good idea, they weren't quite sure what to do with the mechanic yet. The supports in this game are easily among the shortest of them all, and while that doesn't have to be a problem, it certainly becomes one when what is said is also far from interesting in most cases. I feel like the lowlight might just be OJ and Gwendolyn. Their entire chain is basically just, "Oh, are you training? Yes, I am training. Good. We are best friends now." You know how many times you have to put Wendy next to OJ to see this conversation? A lot. A whole lot. Nothing illustrates better how Binding Blade just didn't have it yet than Roy and Lelina's support chain. This is basically the support of this game, and for many people it's the only one they ever saw, as Roy and Lelina start the game with a little bonus, so they're already close to their first conversation. You know, just to teach you this actually exists. But hoo boy, they really didn't want to convince you really wanted to see more of this. While by the end, I think their support chain just barely reaches the minimum standard, it does a nice job of showing how young, inexperienced, and even a little awkward these two still are. Their C support is terrible. Nothing goes outright wrong, like we'll see plenty of times later in this video, but it's so incredibly bland, it's such a nothing conversation that it's shocking this was made the conversation to introduce the idea of supports. It's literally Roy asking Lelina if she's okay 3 times. And she is, so that's that. Good talk. While the Binding Blade is certainly the worst offender of this, it's not like these convos are a thing of the past. Engage never gets as dull as the Binding Blade does, but after you've become familiar with how this entire cast is a group of oddballs, you do kind of find the same lull rearing its ugly head. It's impossible to really highlight one because on their own there is enough to love, it's more so the entire package that ends up feeling a little unfulfilling by the end. It's kinda like fast food. One Engage support is great, but after you keep seeing more and more, it kinda loses its appeal and you start to crave something substantial that never comes. Shadows of Valentia doesn't have that problem whatsoever, but it does have a pretty big outlier among post-Awakening convos that feels like it came right out of the Binding Blade. Jessie is Dean's only support partner, and for Jessie, it is one of only 2. But if you thought that made IS inclined to put some extra effort in, you were completely wrong. The C support sees Dean leave the conversation pretty much immediately, in the B support pretty much the same thing happens, and then in the A support it seems like Dean has finally come around and wants to talk, only for the support to cut off while the conversation feels like it's finally going somewhere. And so we're stuck with absolutely nothing, and Dean ends up as probably the least developed playable character of the support conversation era. I don't think anyone expected a convo like this to still be possible in the post-Awakening and Fates era, but Dean proved it could be done. Alright, on to the second category. Support conversations that aren't boring, but you kinda wish they were, because they're quite problematic instead. And I don't mean the potato controversy of Engage, I mean actually worrying. It shouldn't be a surprise that this type really started showing itself after supports started getting more out there, meaning mostly the 3DS era. Fates has probably the most famous example, which is Soleil and Ophelia. Now, this entire support chain is often criticized as being bad and problematic, but I personally think it's mostly the C support that's the problem here. The B support is odd, it's not great, but it's not too bad, and the A support is pretty often misinterpreted, I feel like. But first, let's start with the C support, where Soleil is pretty much just stalking Ophelia, and she makes very clear that she doesn't want that. I mean, disregarding Ophelia's opening line, this is a pretty realistic depiction of a super messed up situation that is not even remotely taken as seriously as it should be. Certainly a terrible support. However, after a B support with Stark Tunnel Shift, although it's not really anything too bad, especially in a vacuum, we come to an A support that is often lumped in with the C support as also being super problematic, when I am a little more divided on that. It's often said that the game makes Soleil behave problematically, which is true, only to then make Ophelia apologize for it as if she's at fault, and that is just blatantly not true. Literally the first line of the A support is Soleil saying she wants to apologize. She knows she messed up and the game acknowledges it. However, it then further builds upon Ophelia's character by showing how her tendency to imagine everything as if it's some perfect quest leads to her also ending up disappointed. That is a viewpoint you can certainly disagree with. You can say Ophelia shouldn't be feeling like that, and hell, I would agree. I think Ophelia goes way too easy on Soleil here. But the idea that the game is excusing Soleil for her problematic behavior is not correct. Soleil apologizes for it out of her own volition, and Ophelia later calls said behavior absolutely embarrassing. So it is clear that the writers are not saying that Ophelia is at fault here and what Soleil is doing is okay, not remotely. It's instead using Soleil's behavior as a way to show what kind of person Ophelia is. So I don't think the A support is really all that bad, to be honest. It's the C support that I have a problem with. We move on to Awakening now, where we can see a case of generational trauma, I guess. Because while Soleil would end up being the problem in Fate's Land, it was her father Inigo that ends up suffering in Elise at the hands of Na. Unlike Soleil and Ophelia, this one actually starts out pretty good. Na calls Inigo out on his flirty ways and explains to him how this can be considered as quite hurtful by the women. I will say though, the topic kinda runs its course, and by the time we arrive at the A support, what started out as a pretty good message gets a little over the top, as Na is threatening Inigo to behave using her dragon form, but alright, it's nothing too bad. The problem is though that you as a player may have seen how these two clearly don't see eye to eye and still think they would make a perfect couple, meaning that this duo also has an S support tacked on. And this one is easily one of the worst supports of all time. After berating him for C, B and A, Na now suggests out of nowhere that she and Inigo get married. They have zero chemistry, there has been zero build-up, she just drops it on him to his own complete surprise. But she's not joking, not at all, and as we learned earlier, she has a way to make Inigo fall in line. Yes, she threatens to eat and kill him if he doesn't agree to marry her. No wait, let me rephrase that. Them getting married is not what's on the table, it's him possibly cheating. As in, them being married and a couple is not even a discussion. Na said it's gonna happen, and like Inigo himself concludes, he doesn't have a veto in this. He is not allowed to decide who he should be married to, apparently. It's played off as a joke, and I partly get why, because obviously Inigo is a bit of a caricature who's hard to take seriously, but man, if the genders were reversed on this one, we'd be looking at Walter and Erica here, it's that bad. It's basically an arranged marriage between two people who have zero chemistry, and one of them definitely doesn't want it, but goes along out of fear for his life. It's also like the developers wanted to say, oh, you want to pair up these two that clearly don't work well together? Here, have the messed up relationship you're apparently craving. And perhaps the same mindset also inspired the bizarre ending of Camilla and Silas's support chain. This one also starts out decent enough. Camilla wants Silas to deliver messages of love to Corin. It's a little eye-rolling, like all of Camilla's love showers are, but at least this isn't played as some sort of good thing. Silas pretty much consistently reports back that Corin didn't care much and that maybe Camilla should stop doing it. But then it takes a bizarre turn. Silas suddenly starts talking about how he always felt a little jealous of Corin. Not because they are royalty or because they have such lovely siblings. No, he was in love with Camilla, something he confesses out of nowhere. It has not even been remotely hinted at in earlier talks, and at this point in time, Silas can already be married to someone else. This is the A support, remember? Camilla then responds, saying she actually felt something for him too in the past, which again, she can also say while married, and then the two separate. Except, you can decide they meet again for an S support, which resolves this already tricky situation in the worst way possible. Now, kids, if you confess your love to someone and they don't appear to respond, does that mean you can never have a relationship? Not necessarily, but it is up to the person who didn't respond to open that topic again. What happens here? Silas just freaking tries again. He again approaches Camilla asking if she wants to marry him out of nowhere, even though he was pretty much rejected last time. And worst of all, Camilla says no again. Only after Silas reveals that he has asked Corin's blessing does she change her mind. This is just terrible on so many levels. Had this conversation started with Camilla taking the initiative, then it could have been a decent little ending that at least tied up the mess that was the A support. But instead, it made it like 3 times messier. But I guess that's your punishment for pushing through a relationship that was by the end of the A support clearly not meant to be. Now, you'd almost forget, but we still have a third category to tackle, supports that are out of character. Fortunately, and I want to say obviously, this is not as common as the other 2 topics, simply because for many characters, supports are the only way their character is built, meaning that supports are not likely to be out of character. They are the character. But there are exceptions. A good example are the father supports from Awakening. These are largely generic, always the same between child and father, no matter who the father is. The exact script is different, to prevent for example Gregor from losing his characteristic speech pattern, but for some of these characters, just the topic of conversation here is out of character. Like Na considering Noe too young and frivolous for Henry or Donald, and Laurent's conversation with Frederick starting about how they are supposedly nothing alike, even though Laurent is quite similar to Frederick, only to then end with Frederick tickling him and teasing him that he's such a serious proper grown-up, like he wouldn't be proud of exactly that. Another out-of-character machine is Perry. Her psychopathic behavior is so incredibly weird in a game that tries to be pacifist more than it really should, and it causes all kinds of bizarre conversations where characters have to excuse her behavior or turn a blind eye just to make it work. Perry casually tells Felicia she cuts up and kills her servants if they mess up, only for Felicia to then agree to help her train her servants rather than report it to HR. Xander's character in general suffers immensely from having Perry by his side, and their supports do nothing to fix or explain that even remotely, and our conversation with Niles again confirms Perry the Noble was killing her parents' butlers for sport. And everyone is just completely okay with that. They occasionally do a minor double take, but nothing to end the conversation over. It's bizarre, and tonally it makes Fates an even bigger mess than it already was. And so, Perry starts to kind of blur the line between out of character and being problematic at the same time. It's double dipping basically. But one support takes it even further, and is all across the full conversation probably the worst support we have ever seen. Like, so far I've mostly focused on individual conversations, so a C support or an A support, but all 3 of Tethys' talks with Arthur in their Sacred Stones are incredibly problematic and very out of character to boot. In the rest of Tethys' her supports, we see how much she cares for her younger brother Ewan and how she watches over him, as well as how she very cleanly turns down Renak. It's definitely something she had to do many times before with other men, which makes her own interactions with Arthur so inexplicable. While the literal conversation is about Tethys being impressed with Arthur's potential as a dancer, there is a very, very strong undertone of more here. The way Tethys talks about Arthur's looks and movements is not how she would ever talk to a fellow female dancer, and it is obvious she is essentially coming on to him, grooming him to choose the path of a dancer and join her. That is already weird in and of itself, especially since Arthur is clearly not comfortable with it. He struggles to truly tell her off, but his mannerisms and answers speak for themselves. But giving this whole thing a much more worrying undertone is the age difference, combined with how Tethys literally calls him child with every opportunity she has. She is fully aware of Arthur's young age, yet she tries to kiss him in her A support, where it is then revealed that she behaves like this because Arthur reminds her of her first love. Again, this is an adult and a child, which is exactly what Arthur returns to favor and likens Tethys to his mother, which still does not make Tethys realize what the hell she is doing. No, she just continues to tease him until the conversation eventually ends. The entire thing is just messed up. It reads like a high school kid's wild fantasy with a MILF next door, except it's not a fantasy, it's very real, and they're discussing it in the midst of battle even. And that is not me being pedantic, that is actually confirmed in their B support. Not only is this conversation beyond creepy, and does it make absolutely no sense, it is also character assassination of the highest order. If this had been, say, Soleil, then it would still have been messed up, but at the very least it would have been in character. A Fire Emblem character is allowed to be morally disgusting. It's a bit weirder if it's a playable character than a villain, I'll admit, but for names like Perry and Soleil, it is who they are, and while that causes the characters around them to behave weirdly, they are kept consistent. This is everything but that. Tethys is literally the target of pretty similar advances from Renak, and she plays it off in a way that suggests she knows exactly how to deal with it and is beyond done with it too. And now she is out there doing it herself with someone she consistently calls child. There is more contact, more sexual tension in this support between adult and child than there is like 90% of S supports, for crying out loud. It's the worst support chain in Fire Emblem history, I have no doubt about it. But what do you think the worst supports in Fire Emblem are? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing. And if you really want to support me, you can now become a channel member to get all kinds of fun perks and help me keep bringing these videos to your doorstep every week. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.